And his title is To Be or Not to Be. So, should be interesting. He's asked that we, in preparation for it, turn to Acts chapter 17. And I'll be reading verses 22 through 29. So, Acts 17, beginning at verse 22. Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, Ye men of Athens, I perceive that in all things ye are too superstitious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God. Whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him declare I unto you. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is the Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Neither is worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things, and hath made of one blood of all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him, and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone graven by art and man's device. So reads Acts 17, verses 22 through 29. Please give your attention to our brother Casey as he speaks us on his title, To Be or Not to Be.
Oh, well, it is always a pleasure for Martha and I to visit with you folks, and we would extend an invitation to any of you to visit with us at the hall. If you are able to come, we would be very happy to see you. We're going to start with a little quiz and a little game. You feel free to chime in. In fact, you need to chime in. I don't want to answer all these questions myself. Take you back to your days in grammar school. See how much all of us remember of English literature, and particularly English grammar. And so my question to you is to name, I'll say, to name the 8 parts of speech of the English language. Can you remember that from your grammar school days? Words forming sentences and paragraphs are categorized into 8 parts. And so, tell me what those 8 parts of speech are. Yeah. Noun, that's 1. Verb is 2. Adverb is 3, pronoun is 4. Wait a minute, I can't hear everything there. We've got a noun, verb, adverb, and pronoun. Adjective is 5. Conjunction is 6. Preposition is 7. What is 8? No. The 8th one always trips people up. It did me when I was working on this talk some time ago. Go ahead and look it up. Any other? An interjection. Those are your 8 parts of speech. An interjection is something like, wow, he gave a great talk. There. All right. Well, that's pretty good because, like I say, most people don't remember that 8th part of speech, an interjection. That's all we're going to say about interjections today. So, all right, here's the second question for you. Of those 8 parts of speech, which one is generally regarded by linguists and others who study language as the most important one of the 8, meaning that part of speech you really can't do without? Okay, I heard noun softly out there, but mostly verb, and that's correct. You can always remember that, if you care to, by that term, verb, right there. That part of speech, which we call the verb, is called that because it comes from the Latin verbum, which means the word. There. Now, all of us in coming to our service this morning experienced, I think, probably the importance of that word, because I'm thinking that most of us drove to this location, right? Probably did. So, in driving here, you probably passed and obeyed certain traffic signs, right? And what is either written on the traffic sign or symbolized by it, like an octagonal red sign, means what? Stop. That's a verb right there. You stop. If you see the light at the intersection, red, yellow, and green, what does green mean? Go. And what does red mean again? Stop, sure. So we're doing pretty well right now on our quiz. The verb is the most important part of speech. Generally in language, any language, English, French, Mandarin Chinese, whatever it is that you speak, there is one verb that is essential in that language, or we might say is the most important verb. Anybody have any idea what that is? What? Be? Yes. It is basically, it's the verb to be and its various conjugations and that sort of thing. That is the you might want to call it almost the foundational part of speech of any language. Now, I titled think about the title of these remarks. I won't remind you of what they are. See if you may have already forgotten the title. If I was sitting out there, I probably would have. In all of English literature, there is one passage, we'll call it extra-biblical, that employs this verb, or the verb to be, being in the writing, and it has become probably the most famous soliloquy, if you want, or recitation in English that keys off of this particular verb. Can you tell me what that is? Do you remember? Joe's got his hand up there. Joe, what is it? It's Hamlet's soliloquy. A soliloquy is when, in Shakespearean literature, is when a character goes off and is alone and is just talking to himself all the time, but talking out loud. I soliloquize a whole lot of times. So let's see how well you remember your Shakespeare. How many of you know that soliloquy? To be or to be is the question. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Oh. What? Yeah. I'm not interested, you're not interested in having this turn into a class, how well you remember your Shakespeare from your high school days and so forth. I remember the first time I was introduced to that soliloquy from Hamlet, and by the way, it's Act 3, Scene 1, in case you want to look it up when you go home tonight. I listened to or read that to be or not to be, and I don't know about you folks out there, the first time you were exposed to it, but the first time I was and heard that, I said to myself, what in the world does that mean? What does it mean? What is Shakespeare, through this character Hamlet, saying to us? And I don't mean that necessarily in a biblical sense, but in the context of the play. What is the audience supposed to feel and learn from this soliloquy, to be or not to be? I said to myself, what in the world does that mean? What does it mean? And for probably 60 years, I've wondered about it. As I figure I was probably in my early teens when I first heard it. And it's only been recently that I've come to somewhat of an understanding of what Shakespeare was trying to say there, or in the sense of conveying to us something about the character Hamlet and what he means when he says in that soliloquy, to be or not to be. And so before I tell you what I think it means, any of you like to volunteer what you think it means? What does Hamlet mean when he says to be or not to be? That is the question. Walter? Okay. That's one possibility. Yes, sir. I don't know this young gentleman's name. Eli. That's pretty good there, Eli. I'm going to want to talk to you when you're 30 years old. There, yes, sir. Okay, there you go. You and Eli are right with y'all are way ahead of me by about 60 years. I tell you that right now. That is pretty much what Shakespeare is saying through this character, and that's how he's building the scene and the character. Because Hamlet at this stage in the play is thinking about what should I do? And as Eli said, and I also don't know this young man's name, okay, as both of them are saying, it asks a question of more so than just what should I do in the moment, but what am I? And the soliloquy goes on, do I make this choice or do I make that choice? Do I resist? Do I cave in? Is the particular discussion, is the particular thing that Hamlet is trying to resolve in his mind. But for our purposes, the particular thing that Shakespeare had in mind there is not that important, but in the way he is presenting this to us, he's asking the question, which I think in our lives that all of us will ask ourselves at one time or another, and perhaps and probably I would think you will think along these lines more than once, and that is, what am I? What do I do? Or more fundamentally, what is my purpose for being here? Why am I in this situation? And what do I do? Now that will vary for each one of us over time, and particularly will vary with the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Now, all of us right now, at this moment, find ourselves in a particular circumstance. We are here
for a particular reason. We are here, we generally broadcast and proclaim to remember the actions of one individual, but it's not just a remembrance thing, to think about and see how the actions of that individual work in our lives. And as you sit out there, and as I have sat through talks such as this over all of these years, I find myself thinking from time to time, why am I here? If I'm alone in that frame of mind on any particular Sunday, the day we meet, then I would like to talk to some of you later on, and because you may have answered that question, and I would be interested in the answer that you would give to that question. Why am I here? What brought me here today? You can open your Bibles for a moment and turn to Exodus, the 3rd chapter. Moses has been called to a task of leading God's people out of Egypt, and he is wondering exactly what we have been talking about. It's the age-old question, why me, Lord? I don't know that I'm up to the job. And he talks with God, and he asks a question of God. He says, when I go back to Egypt, they will ask me about you, and they will ask a very fundamental question. And this is recorded in the 13th verse of the 3rd chapter. What is his name? What is your name? And what do I say unto them? See, Shakespeare is not the first person in the world, not anywhere near the first person, to present this question to somebody else. He's essentially asking the same question that Shakespeare had Hamlet ask in his play. The next verse is the answer. God said unto Moses, I am that I am. Now, just like not understanding the to be or not to be a portion of Shakespeare's play there, when I have read this verse for any number of years, God saying his name is I am that I am, I don't know about you, but I've always asked myself, what does that mean? What kind of a name is that? Particularly for a God. The being that you consider, that Moses considered supreme, What kind of a name is this? I think of the name of gods like, I am Oz, the great and terrible. To me, that is a much more natural way of thinking about a supreme and a superior being. I am great and terrible. I am Zeus. I will throw a thunderbolt through you if the Spirit moves me. That kind of thing. The gods surrounding Moses had those kinds of attributes. And so for God to reveal himself this way, I am that I am, and we, I think, lose something in translation when we recognize, when we say, or when we might read for that, Yahweh, or something like that. Yahweh, in our way of thinking these days, may now just be an appellation, and identifying, a way of identifying this God, just like I'll identify him as Matthew right there. It conveys no other meaning than that Matthew is not Jerry right there. That's all it means right there. Or Eb over there, or Leanne right there. Yahweh becomes that. And when we do that, we've lost something in translation there, because that's not how God is answering Moses. He is not saying, you can call me Yahweh, and they can call their God over there Baal, or Baal, as we say. That's not what he means right here. That's not what the response is to convey to Moses and through Moses to the children of Israel. And so our last question, my last question to my audience today is, what is to be conveyed in this name? I am that I am. I'm not going to worry about, some Christadelphians say it's future tense. I will be what I will be. And I also understand that the term also conveys a past meaning. I was what was. This kind of a thing. That's interesting to discuss, but my question to you is, what is God conveying to Moses and to us by giving us this name? I am that I am. Yes. Jason, yes.
I will make myself manifest in many ways.
Okay, that's a good way of looking at it. Any other ideas? Randy? I do not change. Okay, Leah? The eternal one. All of those answers that we've gotten there is what is being conveyed in this name to us. The Hebrew, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, so don't feel free to go out and double check everything I say. In fact, you're well advised to do that. But what I understand the Hebrew is saying here is that God's name that he is expressing to Moses here is the verb form of the Hebrew to be or not to be, so to speak. And just as we've said, the verb is fundamental. You cannot operate without verbs in your language. You cannot communicate. And the verb to be is the fundamental verb in anybody's language. It expresses being, as we read in Acts. In him we live and move and have our being. That's why Paul says that, because of what God revealed unto Moses in his name. We live and move and have our being in the Creator God, and that's what he wants us to understand. It is not a question of, I am the great and terrible, as Oz revealed himself. Don't pay any attention to that man behind the curtain there. Those things are made up. Here, what we learn from Scripture is a fundamental teaching, right here, that it is with God and in God that we move, we live, and have our being. And just like I can't function in my life, and you can't function in your life without a sense of being, a sense of what you are, a sense of what makes you do whatever you do. What God is saying through Moses here is that will be done in conjunction with me. To be or not to be is what this means for everybody who reads it there. What will you be? What will you do? It is no accident that Jesus, I've got them written down here and I have to refer to them, that Jesus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, at least 10 times uses the term, I am something. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the bread of life. We focus in on the object of the verb in those circumstances. What does it mean to be the door? What does it mean to be the bread of life? What does it mean to be the resurrection? I would just leave you with the thought, don't forget the first part of that statement. I am the foundation of the door. I am what brings light to the world. And it is in association with God through Jesus that we can realize the answer to the question. To be or not to be? That is the question. God was giving us the answer very early on, and we'll remember it here at the memorial table. Thank you for your attention.